All right, here we are.
Here we are.
Again, the Data Protection Breakfast Club with Anjali from Facebook, who you now work with.
Yes, we're on the same team. We get to
Yes,
do all kinds of hard things together.
double Facebook episode. So
Yeah.
excited to talk about what really we like about her so much is she's so uh, thoughtfully outspoken
Yeah.
about her views. Doesn't
Unapologetic.
hold back, right? And so that's really wonderful and one of her best qualities, in addition to being ridiculously sharp and incisive lawyer who picked up privacy just 3 years ago, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
incredible. So you I mean
Yeah.
you work with her every day.
Yeah. I mean, I've only worked with her a short time. I've known her much longer, but like Anjali's one of the most like principled people in the privacy game.
Sure.
And that doesn't mean that she's not flexible or not unwilling to compromise. It means she works from a set of values, and I think the values really are like fairness, right? And equity. Like I see every decision I've seen her make in the short time I've been here has essentially revolved around those two things, and everything else comes after. And look, what an amazing resource for a company like Facebook that's facing the types of challenges that it's facing, and forced to make some of the decisions that it has to make based on the power of its platform, to have a strong female, intelligent, values-based voice
It's
in the company in a position of power to influence the decision making. Like
people
Facebook's really
like her.
lucky.
It's people like her when there are critics for Facebook about data issue or like
Yeah.
something. It's critics out there all over the place, uh, media articles and things. It's people like her that I know and you know that are inside these companies working on these very complex problems.
Yep.
That's they are no doubt hiring as many people like her and you to attack these incredibly complex problems. So that's where the people should feel that things are moving in a good direction in those kinds of places. And
Yeah, I totally agree, man.
Twitter's the
And
same way.
like, yeah, and I'll say this other piece. I had my reservations about coming to Facebook. I've been honest with Facebook and with the world about that. Like I've been a critic at times, pretty strong one, and I'm still critical in some ways. Um, her presence here for me was a principal factor in deciding that I would come here, because I know she wouldn't be here if the company was not trying to do the right thing. She
Yep,
wouldn't be here because
yep.
I believe in her principles that strongly. And we had a conversation before I joined, and she was honest and candid with me about the good things and the bad things about coming. And I decided that joining forces with her was the best thing I could do, not just for my career and all these things, but like to have the most impact at the point of my career where I should be having the most impact, right? And I love Salesforce, as you know, and still do, and hold that company in the highest regard. But if we're talking about my most productive years, when I can exercise the most influence and have the most energy backed by experience, this felt like the place where I could spend the next, 5 years or whatever or longer, working on the hardest issues, with the most resources, with the best people to try to drive, good outcomes for the world.
uh, it's an awesome responsibility that y'all are taking on, and so I'm really psyched for this conversation because she's going to be so thoughtful on these issues. And here we go.
Let's go do
All right, here we are.
it.
Here we
Protection
are.
Breakfast Club.
Here we are.
Fight the Power episode. Public Enemy with someone who's not our enemy whatsoever.
But we fight the power together.
Anjali from Facebook. And when we asked you to join this, you did not work with Pedro.
I did not.
But now here we are.
Now we're here to fight the power. Now we're fighting the power together.
That's right. That's right. We're trying to change the path of the universe. It's nice that we're all wearing black hoodies. I don't think we super planned that. I mean, I showed up at the last minute, but we're all wearing black hats and black hoodies, and that was not planned.
This is legit.
That's right.
And we always say here we are because it's an homage to our favorite, or my favorite, Instagram account, which we have to tell you about, which is just another food review page. Just another food review page. And Pedro sent me the link to the new one. You beat me to it.
It's so good.
he just reviews restaurants, and he always starts with, "All right, we're here."
And it's like always some like strip mall joint, you know, like the last one was like a gyro shop in like New Jersey. And he's like super enthusiastic. Hey, you know, what's we gotta connect with that guy. I'm gonna send him a DM, Andy. And I know it's a little bit of a wild card, but we gotta get him on the pod.
He should at least do the intro.
That's right.
What was the one, not to get derailed here too much, I love this guy though. What was the one restaurant that was Mania, like Pizza Mania? That was, like, we're at Pizza Mania.
Here we go.
He's great. We should go.
I'll tag you in it. I'll tag you in it. It's good. It's good. And truth be told, like the reviews are actually pretty good. Like substantive, like it's good. Like the content is good, but it's also just way too intense for a food review. So it just works perfect.
It's really good, and it's just an example of great Instagram content. So
great Instagram content.
The company you work for keeps pumping out stuff. I'm here for it.
Yeah, and you can't make content like that because it's a little bit more long form on TikTok. Just saying.
Just get those jabs in.
Just saying.
Yeah. Well, let's dive in. So
let's do it.
Yeah, let's talk about how we met. I don't even know, honestly, if I remember. Probably
Me neither.
Through Julia.
Through Julia.
And did you
yeah, so I started, you know what happened? I came back from maternity leave and I was at AppNexus, repping that razzle dazzle over here. And Julia was like, hey, the GDPR is coming. I can't do this by myself. You have to help me. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I started doing privacy work. I can't even believe I started doing privacy just 3 years ago.
That's crazy.
3 years ago? That didn't even make sense.
Man. 3 years, 2017. 3.5.
I feel like you've been doing this for 50 years, but okay. That's
yeah.
Cool.
So AppNexus had a thing where there were a lot of lawyers from Latham and Watkins, of course, but also there were a lot of like corporate transactional M&A people that were converted their work a little bit. And then you're an example of that. Like, how did that go for you? Because you did traditional M&A and that work in law firms and stuff.
Yeah. So actually, before AppNexus, I was at Davis and Gilbert. So I was doing M&A, but for the agencies.
Yeah.
For like Publicis, depending on who you ask, and Omnicom and all those big ones. And so I had like a little bit of an understanding of their businesses and like what was going on with them and who they were acquiring, all these small companies. But really what happened is, Julia was just like, I know you, you're gonna be able to do this work, come work here. And how did the transition go? I mean, there were like 4 of us, you know?
Yeah.
So
shout out to Gary at Davis and Gilbert. Is he still there? I hope so.
Who is?
Gary Keibel.
Yeah, he's still there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to shout out the wrong employer, but yeah, shout out to Gary.
Oh yeah, that's right. Gary and I go way back.
Before we met Gary, like at Data Zoo, we worked with Davis and Gilbert. But like before that happened, I was in-house at TD Ameritrade, and I was doing our contract. We changed our ad agency, like our big contract with our ad agency, over to this large agency, and it was such a big agreement that we all like flew and met and negotiated it together. And there was this lawyer in the room from Davis and Gilbert, and I was a young punk. I'd never heard of anyone, never heard of like the firm, never heard like anything at all. And apparently this Ron is like a major advertising lawyer, like maybe one of the best advertising lawyers in the country. And I'm just like this 26-year-old kid across the table from him, like fighting about patent troll stuff, which doesn't really have to do with the advertising work we were doing, but it was like the hot thing at the time. And I was like, we need uncapped liability for these patents. And he was like, that's not really relevant, but okay.
Shout out. Yeah. Shout out to TD Ameritrade, man. Like, didn't they merge with somebody? I feel like there's like a whole lot of stuff.
First they
You know,
bought.
hold on a second. Hold on a second.
They
I just
bought-
realized I have like an Amazon product on my desk. And I'm not here to do free advertising. Like, hold on. I literally just noticed that it was in the shot. No shout out to Amazon, but a shout out to Panther Coffee, a real small business from my hometown. Anyway, sorry, Andy. TD Ameritrade got acquired somewhere or merged with somebody. Did I hear this?
Yeah, first they bought Scottrade and then Schwab acquired them.
Schwab is what it is. Okay, sorry. I just making sure I wasn't totally confused there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so Anjali, so all right, let's back to Anjali. So worked at the firm, went to work with Julia, and how long were you there?
For almost 5 years. I left right before my fifth. No, that's not right. Yeah, that's right. About almost 5 years. I actually left somewhat unfortunately. You know, AT&T acquired AppNexus.
Yeah.
And then I left right before I would have gotten my sabbatical. It's the last year that they were doing sabbatical. So I would have been able to take like a nice 3 weeks, add some vacation onto that, nice 3 or 4 weeks off. But it worked out because they put me on garden leave. So I got those 4 weeks anyway.
Nice.
Were you there for the transaction?
What's that?
Were you there for the transaction?
I was there for the transaction. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was a doozy. I wasn't, you know, they kept it pretty tight. So I wasn't working on the transaction directly, obviously like helping, but yeah, I was really just focused on all GDPR and post GDPR world at that time. Right. And like, and on the merger, like we kind of figuring out the transition and everything like that. So
what was the exec engagement like on privacy at AppNexus? Like all three of us have a pretty direct line to this from our previous companies where we were small enough that we were dealing with the entire executive team on the issue. That's because right. Privacy was so fundamental to what we were doing. So I was curious from your perspective, when you came in and started working really hard on GDPR, what was the exec engagement like there?
Yeah, so I'll say at first, I don't think that they took it as seriously as Julia knew it was going to be.
Yeah.
This is why I will say, like, this is when I realized that, like, I already knew Julia was like a powerhouse, but this is when I realized it. She literally like took those execs, you know, to task on GDPR and on privacy, and just saying like, we got to get out ahead of this. And she changed their minds.
Nice.
So by the end of it, by the time we like were spinning it up, you know, the CTO was our executive sponsor on it. We were meeting with him like twice a week, like as a team, like a small group, meeting with him twice a week or 3 times a week. And she was probably meeting with him every day. And, you know, Brian was like, Brian, the CEO, was meeting with her all the time and like really talking about this, getting in rooms with clients and talking about it. So she turned it around. You know, I think a lot of executives at smaller ad tech companies, they have so many things that they have to think about to keep their business afloat, right? Like they were just like, there's so many possible things for them to focus attention on. So getting someone to focus on this before anyone really understood how much it was gonna like start shifting the industry was huge.
Just goes to show you how far that has come when Brian O'Kelly testified in front of Congress about these very issues. So right. If, you know, we like to pump up our friend Julia, but that's legit. Like
she really, yeah, I think, yeah, she like changed the industry in some ways, like really not change, but like push the industry, the whole industry. So
she's so,
you like to pump her up though.
Yeah, she's so technically strong. How did you approach that? Like, was that your approach too?
Yeah, so I really believe, I mean, Pedro can tell you, I like to get in the weeds. I love being on this stuff. Like the hardest thing actually about like advancing in my career has been that like at some point you have to start balancing not being in the weeds as much with like, you know, because you can't do all the work. You have to let other people do the work and you have to manage that and think more strategically, which is great. I like thinking strategically, but like the best way to think strategically is to understand the work. And so I mean, this is what I learned from Julia. The best place you're going to learn is from an engineer. Like if you can figure out how to talk to them, that's the hard part. If you can figure out how to talk to them, that is the way you learn. And the next hard part is, how do you influence them? Like, how do you influence the people who are actually building the thing, that they need to be on board with what you're saying? She taught me all that.
How do you do that? How do you, what
Hold on. I'm gonna write all this.
Exactly. Very gingerly. Yeah, like you have to force them to live in the gray, because they don't, like a lot of technical folks, they don't like to live in the gray. They want, they'll come at you and say, just give me some principles and I'll just like apply them to everything I do. And you're like, sorry, this is a moving target. Like, you're going to do this thing. And then someone's like, Apple's going to swoop in. Some company, some big platform's going to swoop in.
We can say Apple.
They always want the requirements. What are the requirements?
Well, they not only do they want the requirements though, they want binary requirements. Like, you can either do this or you can do that. It's either 0 or 1. And that is just never going to be the recommendation, right? It's like, well, you've got a spectrum of choices and we've got to apply certain tests to these. One of them being the very empirical eye test, right? Which drives them nuts, right? And then after we're done with the eye test, we've got to do the pacing tests, right? And then we've got to do the ear test. And so like, engineers look at you like you're a crazy person, right? And it's like, when you start getting into conversations, I think, and I've already been able to watch Anjali do this really well, but like, sometimes it's like, it's less about telling them what the X's and O's of their work is, and more trying to point out the ambiguity that we're dealing with, right? And then have them kind of lay a plan that sort of walks that minefield, but is also flexible. That's the hardest thing, I think. I don't know what you guys think about it, but that's the hardest thing I think there is in trying to influence an engineering process, is having them build contingency and flexibility into it. Like, they're very like, we're going to get from A to C, and then these are the 8 steps to get there. And it's like, well, on step 4, we might have to like take a little detour, depending on what happens in 2 weeks, by, or what's said in the news by some guy who knows nothing about this, but it's going to change everything, right? Like, and that's the hardest part, at least from where I sit.
Yeah, I think that's right. Flexibility in the process, and also flexibility in the outcome.
Oh, good. Very good. Yes.
Like, you have to be prepared that you have to shift what you think is going to happen. I think that's really hard, especially for product teams. I know this is not what we're supposed to be talking about, fighting the power, but
anything. Yeah.
Product teams, I think this is hard for product teams, because they're gold against like getting something done by the end of the quarter, by the end of the half. Like, they have a specific outcome that they need to get to, a specific number they need to hit. And that just isn't how it works in privacy, right? Like, especially in the environment we live in right now, where like, we don't even know what next year is really going to look like. Like, we don't know what 6 months from now is going to look like completely. We can, as Pedro likes to say, we can look into our crystal ball, and we can give the best advice possible, and we can try and guide them, but we don't
know for sure. Like, we don't have a determinative process. We can't do that. And we're not going to be able to give you that. It's very predictive, and a lot of the times, like the margin of error, the Martians come. The margin of error is big.
Is not over.
It's not over, man. They'll be here in a week. Speaking about fight the power, though, like, I do want to ask something about this, Anjali, because like, I think this is a unique episode in the sense we both work at the same place and kind of do the same thing. Yeah. And like, from the outside looking in, you've been at Facebook longer than I have. Obviously, I've only been here a month and change. You've been here, what is it now? Like 2 years almost? 2 years? Yeah, 2 years. So you've been at Facebook for a while now. My take is that a lot of the controversy around Facebook, well, it's 2 things. One, obviously, and Facebook has admitted this, like, there's a lot of work to be done in transparency and in improving the way information is shared and disseminated on Facebook. We know that. And there's lots of brilliant people working on those problems to try to figure them out. The other thing, though, that is a little less Facebook specific is the tremendous disruption that like social media, and it's not just Facebook, it's TikTok, it's YouTube, it's Snapchat, it's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's whatever, WhatsApp. The tremendous disruption to the status quo and to the hoarding of power that social media platforms have. Right. And a lot of what Public Enemy talked about was like telling truth to power.
Yep.
And I think social media, in a lot of ways, tells a lot of truth to power, even if that truth is a lie, which is your power hangs from a thread and it requires our acquiescence and cooperation for it to work. And regardless of your point of view on social media, whether it's radical, right, wrong, productive, not productive, constructive, destructive, it is all of that combined into one big thing is really a testament to the power of the populace and the people and the amount of change that can be driven by just a random person out there with a big microphone. And I think that threatens a lot of policymakers and threatens a lot of civil society types who derive their power from silence and acquiescence in a lot of ways. And so I think while there's a lot of things that need to be improved, and I mentioned that a second ago, and there's a lot of people at a lot of companies working on fixing, we don't want to disseminate false news or terrorism or anything like that. There's this other piece, which I think is just as important, and I don't think we should quell it. I think the amplification of individual and group voices without the need to work through traditional channels is a beautiful thing. Thoughts?
I totally, actually, Andy, I'll let you go because you don't work at a social media company. So.
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this. It's really of the moment, of course, right? We are without, let's use Twitter as an example. Without Twitter, the president, who is a horrible person, doesn't have the amplification methods that he might otherwise have. So his horrible messages are amplified at a time when the country needs other messages to be amplified. However, what is also great about Twitter is that other voices are amplified too. And so you have science voices, you have people speaking truth to power directly to him.
Yeah.
On Twitter.
Like me, I told him to fuck off because he's a jerk.
From a small, F you or like you're crazy to Andy Slavitt, who used to be, in the Obama administration, speaking about actual health related COVID issues that matter so that you can get that balance that you need. I think that then now I'll let you guys comment, because this is where your job comes in to help us filter and help understand what is truth and what is complete and utter dangerous garbage.
So Andy, I think this is really interesting because I think, part of the problem we're dealing with here is that we live in a society where there is a long-standing belief that the way to get to truth is to let everybody speak, and the truth will rise to the top. And that theory came about at a time when only certain people had the ability to speak.
Exactly.
And so, and there was a different premium put on certain things, right? On, for instance, if you only have, out of 100 people, if only 10 people actually are able to speak and have access to educational materials, and they can understand the whole spectrum of voices that are out there, because there are only 10, right? But in a world where everybody has a microphone, and Pedro, I'm just gonna alter one little thing that you said, because you said whoever has the biggest microphone, but actually I think the point is you don't even have to have a big microphone. You just have to say something kind of at the right time in the right way, and who knows, you might be the next, internet superstar. And so I think that balancing that's what we haven't figured out yet. That's not a problem with social media per se. That's a problem with the internet, a problem and a benefit, right? Is both. And so, because for every Trump, you have a Black Lives Matter protest, right?
Greta Thunberg.
That's right. That's right. So you have people able to push back. So people able to organize, people able to get pulled together, people able to find their communities, right? Find their communities that they weren't able to find when they were just themselves alone in their town and their, so I think that is huge. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear, there's a delivery happening at my house in the back.
It's your bunker supply.
It's the feds. We're done.
I think it actually may be my husband signing for his birthday gift from my brother right now.
Nice.
So yeah. So I think
This is the best. Tell him to say hi. Tell him to say hi. Now he's got to show up.
He's like wearing his pajamas. He's not going to come. This is his last day of work. This is his last day of work.
Okay, good. Congratulations, by the way.
Yes. Please save us. Please, please save us.
Yeah. So like, I think that's right. I think we have to figure out how to bring the truth to the top, right? Like, how do we help bring the truth to the top? But you don't want to completely stifle people you don't want to stifle disagreement. It's hard to tell what's not truth versus like there's a line, right, between purposeful misinformation and different beliefs. And I don't know that we have figured out how to find that line. Like, I want to just be really clear. I'm not defending purposeful misinformation or even misinformation in general. You both know I have very strong opinions about what should and shouldn't be allowed in terms of like what people are able to say, but in those kinds of forums. But I do think there's a question of like separating difference of opinions from misinformation. And I don't know that we should be stopping all difference of opinions, because that pendulum could swing the other way very quickly. Right?
What's the framework within which you don't have to tell me exactly what you're doing, right? Because that's your job. But what's the framework within which, or the lens within which you are working on this topic? And you could also just speak sort of broadly about what you think about, how people responsible for these things and social media companies are attacking it. But what's the approach?
Well, I can tell you, like, super high level, Andy, like, I think it's two-pronged, right? It's about fairness and it's about truth, right? If you're not telling the truth, nobody wants to amplify your message, and you can determine whether a fact is a fact or not, right? There's no such thing as a false fact, even though some people will tell you that there is. So, like, de-emphasizing lies, I think, is a strategy across all platforms right now, right? And that's difficult to do in the context of like a president, where you have to now weigh the truthiness of what they're saying versus the value of hearing from the president because of who they are. And that's a hard thing. Twitter has a hard time figuring that out. Facebook does. Like, it's a hard issue. It's much easier with me. If I go on there and say vaccines are causing COVID-19 vaccines are causing cancer, and wear aluminum foil around your head so that you don't get radiation poisoning from police sirens, you can just mute me. But if Donald Trump says that, well, you gotta let the people know that he's a quack, because like he's running the government. And so I think it's a difficult thing. And again, it cannot be formulaic or prescriptive, and it's going to require judgment, and nobody's going to get it right all of the time. That's what makes this hard. I think the other component of the whole thing is fairness, right? Like, when people are actually articulating opinions, which you can't say that's true or false, that's the way you feel. Like, let's say I feel marginalized, and then there's a group that says, well, but you're actually not being marginalized because we think that it's fair. That's a debate that's worth having. Balancing the voices there in a proportionate way to how they exist in the actual world is important. And what I mean by that is, I know there are actual scientists who really believe that climate change is not a human effect, and they can point to some evidence about that. But we know that the consensus among scientists is that that's not the case, that the case is that human beings' intervention on the planet is accelerating the change of climate on Earth. Well, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to, like, the Fox News or CNN model, to have a climate change denier scientist on one side and then a climate change proponent on the other, and have them debate. To quote Colbert, what would be more fair is to have 99 climate change scientists versus one on the screen, and 99 of those folks sit there and say, yeah, cool, nice point, but the 99 of us think that it's this other thing. Social media is actually better suited for that, where old media is not. Fox News is never going to have 100 people on a panel, and 99 of them have one position. But on Twitter, if you say something wacky, people are coming for you, right? And a lot of the times, they're coming for you with facts. People aren't as dumb as the media makes it seem that we are. We are not stupid. Look at the election. The Americans, 7 million more Americans voted for sanity than not, right? Like, and that there's a political component to that, which, can be debated. But also, I think people want to return to, I think you said this yesterday, Anjali, like, I don't want to wake up in the morning every day and just wonder what the president's up to, right? And wonder if that means that by 6 p.m., like, I'm going to be in a bunker. Like, I think regardless of politics, a lot of people reacted that way. And if you go on the internet, you can see some general consensus. One more thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, because this is important. For all the QAnons and like radical whack jobs on left and right that you'll find all over social media, there are Black Lives Matter movements, which was a wave that started on Facebook and has changed the world for the better, has raised awareness about something that would be impossible. Traditional media has always had cameras and has always had reporters. Why does it take an amateur to bring attention to the George Floyd situation, right? Well, because that amateur happens to be standing there. That citizen was there. And their ability to project a message that's important and shared it all over the world, and it has changed the world. Standing Rock is another example. Standing Rock, Black Lives Matter is a manifestation of what was happening at Standing Rock. Native American people, well, we don't have to get into the plight of Native Americans. We all know and understand how sad that has been in the history of this country. What a sad chapter. It's not even a chapter. Like, it's just a dialogue as the country has advanced. But for social media, people would not know what was happening at Standing Rock. There were people standing in front of like armed like mercenaries paid by big oil companies to protect their sacred lands, right? And risking their lives and getting hosed down and gassed in like cold temperatures. Where was the media? Nowhere, until this started showing up on social media. And then it became, the Standing Rock phenomenon, where we saw what some of the big corporate interests were doing on lands that had been promised and been held sacred for, 2,000 years. And all of a sudden we're going to build a pipeline through it. So anyway, it amplifies important movements. And I think that far outweighs the fringe. We still have to work on that stuff. Misinformation and truthiness matters. There are billions of dollars and tons of talent focused on those things all across companies like Facebook, not just at Facebook. And we'll have to figure out what right feels like, but it's not going to be perfect, right? Like, I just don't think that's a feature. Anyway, that's me on my bully pulpit. I'll be quiet now.
But I'll actually say, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think this is true of any form that what's happening right now with the internet and social media is true of any form of media, right? Like, you could say about the TV and the civil rights movement, right? Like, the TV brought the civil rights movement into people's homes, people who lived in their white towns with their perfectly manicured lawns and had no idea what was happening. All they heard was the biased news that they were seeing in their paper every day, until they saw images of children being hosed, shot with, hit with fire hoses and with the dogs. Like, I was just reading a lot more about the Children's March in Alabama. And I think that, like, it's just that imagery is not something you could get from a newspaper, where the people who decide what goes in the newspaper are specific to your local town and are just have the same biases that you do. But when you're exposed to the broader national media, that changed things. But there are negatives to TV too, right? Like, people, it rots your brain, and kids are going to sit inside and watch TV all day, and they're not going to have relationships anymore. They're just going to be looking at this box all day. Like, those things happened with TV also, and they're happening now with the internet. And what we need to do is find solutions to the problems, not say that we got to throw don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And so I think that is right. The internet, social media has brought that into people. Now, I think the problem that I see and that I think is real are these filter bubbles, right? Like, is confirmation bias, because it's happening on both sides. It helps, you can start a movement on Facebook because everybody who sees your posts already believes in what you believe in, and they're already at the place where they're gonna latch onto it. And that's true on Twitter too, right? If you look at like tweets, not from the president, but from like just, right-wing or left-wing pundits, like all the responses, not all, 90% of the responses are, yeah, we agree with you, right? Like, I think these filter bubbles, they are something that we have to really think hard about, because people don't.
I think they know what to show you though too, right? So you're if I click on the replies to a Trump tweet, I'm seeing a lot of like debunking, and
Yeah.
as opposed to what
Which would not
somebody else
happen.
might see, yeah, like I agree with this hogwash. So
But I'll say this, Andy, like to both of your points here, I think we have to be careful because like politicians don't realize what they're doing. And if you overregulate establishment social media, which is a weird thing to say, but like if you think Twitter, Facebook, YouTube as kind of the triforce that, and then a bunch of others. I'm not trying, TikTok obviously is nothing to trifle about, and there's a bunch of snaps out there. There's a bunch. But if you take the like established social media companies and you rip them to shreds, right? And they have less resources to manage some of this problem, they're not going to do it as effectively. And then the other thing is, if you encourage users to leave these platforms that actually have the resources to implement change and police, and then move to platforms where none of that is regulated, and then you live in an actual filter bubble, and we all know what I'm talking about because it's out there. Now what you've actually created is a silo of nonsense. And I'm not going to sign up for that radical right social media platform. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go there and police it. But if I see garbage on my Facebook feed, and I'm not just saying things I disagree with politically, I'm saying falsehoods and non-truths, okay? If I see non-truths on my Facebook timeline, I'm flagging it. I'm not going over to Parler to do anything, right? And so anyway, to Anjali's point, like I think you're not only, there's always going to be bubbles, but if you create impenetrable bubbles, now you really got a problem. At least that's my take.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, let me say this is part of why I like groups, like being able to be part of communities and groups, because then you're getting your information or your differences of opinions or whatever, even falsehoods, they come in a community where people feel maybe hopefully a little safer to respond, and they respond maybe with a little bit of a different take than they do to a politician who says the same thing, right? Who everybody like thinks should just, if you're putting it out there, like you should be able to take it if you're a politician. And I do agree with that actually, but like, but I think, I do think we need to think about how do we get people to see media, maybe it's the news articles that are put in front of them, those kinds of things that are different than what they might normally see. Maybe not completely, they don't have to be like the other side, right? Like I'm not saying like I want to see Breitbart start showing up in my feed, or like I'm not following Breitbart on Twitter, right? Like I don't want that, but like things that are maybe not, you could very easily fall into a spot where you are getting like just Occupy Wall Street all day long, right? I don't want that either.
Yeah, same.
So like, I think that's the hard part, because people actually don't want, like, here's the unfortunate part. These platforms, all of them, they want people to stay engaged, of course, right? Like that's part of what their business is. And so to do that, if people don't like what they're seeing, they won't stay engaged, right? Like you're not going on Parler because you're not gonna like anything you see. It's just gonna make you angry, and and you don't have any interest in that, so you won't get engaged there. So how do you give people information and keep them engaged? Give them information that they don't necessarily want to see, and keep
or do what Twitter and Facebook and others are trying to do, which is, okay, well, look, your timeline is your timeline, but if something that our independent fact checkers determine is false shows up on your timeline, well, there's going to be a little thing under it that says, hey, click here. That you might want to question what you're reading, because there's some, and look, and then it's up to you to decide the kind of person you want to be. Like, I don't think it's social media's job to make people change who they are or like change their values that are inherent to them. Like, I just don't think that's the role of journalism either. Like, it's to provide people with information and verify its truth and try to verify its truthiness. And I think what's making journalism, like traditional journalism, and politicians extremely uncomfortable is that if you lie now, someone's going to call you on it, period. Like, period. Someone's going to call you on your lie. You're going to get a lot of fans that are going to buy your lie, But I think what's going to happen is you're going to have to deal with the backlash of the lie. And that just wasn't the case even 10 years ago. And then journalists' job is changing. Like, they don't get to decide anymore what's important to me. Like the local news, if you watch local news in any city, it's murders, car accidents, fraud, and DUIs for 30 minutes. That was 10 years ago. Now they can't do that as much. They have to give people information related to what they know people are interested in. And where do they go to find that out? Social media, right? And it's like, okay, well, now the news of the day in Atlanta has to be about something else because people don't care about this. Well, they do, but we're not going to emphasize this issue because it's not what people are interested in. The media doesn't get to dictate to me what's important anymore. They have to listen to me to figure out what I'm thinking about. And then I think the next step for the media should be, okay, cool. Well, here's what the public is interested in. COVID-19. Let's go get facts. Let's go get facts about it and share that.
I agree with you, except I think that what we see every day actually, like, it's not telling me what I want to see, but it is kind of telling me what I want to see.
I know what you mean.
Who I am, and I know my opinions and my beliefs. And I'll tell you a story. My aunt and uncle, they immigrated here in the 70s. My parents are very, or I will say they still are, or we're very close to them. They helped my parents when my parents came here. They helped them settle in. They picked up my mom at the airport when there were no phones and she didn't have any way to call my dad. You know, like they did a lot for my family. And my parents went to visit them a few years ago. I think back in maybe 2015 or 2016. They live in Atlanta. And
shout out to Atlanta.
Yeah. My dad said that he could not, this is his cousin, almost like his brother. He said, I don't know if I can go back there because they had Fox News playing the whole time. And he was like, and their opinions, their beliefs have changed as a result of that, right? Like they are immigrants and they're anti-immigration. Right, they are immigrants. They came and they faced a lot of racism when they came because the early 70s immigration just opened up to Indians in the 60s. You know, like it was like they were completely, and they have changed their positions all around, completely around. And my dad said it's hard to see that, and he thinks, and I think this is probably true. It's a result of watching Fox News 24 hours a day. Right. Yeah. And so I think, like, yes, the media doesn't get to tell me what stories I'm interested in, but actually, even though we don't realize it, the media is always influencing what it is we're interested in.
I think you're right, but it varies by generation. Media cannot tell Generation Z what to think. Period. Hard stop. You know why? Because they don't watch that shit. And that's why they're worried. I don't know a single 16-year-old that's interested in any way in television. Hard stop. Like they don't care, and so the media is losing that grip. But they have a grip on your uncles. They have a grip on my parents. Well, on people in my family, and because that's the way that they absorbed information. I mean, my stepdad still reads the newspaper, right? Like, you know, these kind of things. And so, like, there is a disproportionate influence on advanced generations. And I'm telling you, these Z kids don't care. They don't care. Like, they don't even use Facebook. Like, these kids are in this other plane of information. I mean, it's Instagram, it's TikTok, it's Snapchat, and the rest is leave me alone. And that's where they get a lot of their stuff. But more importantly, like, they don't have a lot of time for, at least, and I guess obviously all this is anecdotal, but like my impression of Generation Z, which I find really positive, is they don't have a lot of time for pontification. They're not interested. Like, they're just not interested.
Do you think that's true outside of our echo chamber? So if you look at Generation Z, we all, you know, happen to have a certain progressive persuasion.
Yeah.
What is it like that in Texas? There's Generation Z in Texas. There's Generation Z in, you know, places that are less progressive.
I'll just give you this example.
I truly hope that the younger generation is more progressive generally by nature, but I don't know. I don't think.
But I'll say this thing. My generation, millennial, and I'm an old one, right? I just talk about the image of the Latino and Black male for me in media as I was growing up. Drug dealers, alcoholics, immigrants, laborers. This is how Latinos are portrayed to me by the media forever, like until like my whole life. And that's just the way it was, right? Generation Z, Don't think so. If you guys don't have a TikTok account or an Instagram, I know we're on Instagram, watch them. Go on Reels, go on TikTok and watch them. There was an entire movement this year of young white kids. This is not political, by the way. Young white kids exposing their parents' racism on TikTok, literally with their phone saying, Mom, Black Lives Matter, their parents saying something ridiculous, and them coaching their parents through this. I mean, it was an entire phenomenon. My generation, first of all, didn't have that activist spirit. And second of all, I mean, we're talking about little white country kids challenging their parents on social media in their parents' homes, you know, for the world to see. Like, this is a way of behaving that I've never seen before. And that I think is going to change the dynamics of the public dialogue. It's not that these kids are growing up liberal. It's that these kids have too much information to be fooled by tropes like my generation was, where they're, you know, Blacks and Latinos have a propensity for violence and alcoholism. Those are tropes perpetuated by media and Hollywood that are untrue. They're actually false. And it's taken me adulthood to realize that those are false tropes. These kids won't have that built into them. They just won't.
I mean, I think that they have more information, so they don't have to have that built in. But Andy, I do wonder that in a lot of communities, especially not coast, like a lot of communities in the middle of the country, a lot of communities in the South, they don't have, well, maybe not in the South so much, but like I guess even in the South, they don't have as much exposure necessarily. Actually, even in the Northeast, right? They don't have exposure necessarily to other communities. And so it is good. The internet brings that exposure to their door, and that is hugely beneficial. But it isn't clear to me that that's what they're seeing when they open up their feeds.
Yeah.
Like they're not, if I'm in the middle of the country and I'm like a little white kid living in a super conservative town and I open up my TikTok, am I seeing those kids who are challenging their parents? I don't know. And like, I'm also, Pedro, I think we're like at the same, I don't know what year you were born. I was born in 1982. So I'm like right on the
81.
edge. Yeah. So I'm like right on the edge also of millennial. And I know, like, when I went to college, I had a lot of friends from college and law school. I had a lot of friends from like the Midwest and from these towns. And they, my friends are progressive, but like their parents and their communities, their friends, their communities, they were not, like they are not. And they moved to New York and they remained not, like these are people living in the city, not like they're so ingrained in their beliefs. And I don't know that they're getting exposure to these things, Pedro. I don't know that they're getting that exposure when they open up a super personalized feed.
I get what you're saying. My only response to that would be, at least now they have the chance. You cannot control what CNN displays. You cannot control what Fox News displays or MSNBC. You can play around on your feed, and if you're even have an inkling of curiosity, find out about anything you want to. I could not do that when I was 15 years old. I could only absorb the information that was available to me by the people deciding what was going to be available to me, which weren't Latinos. The textbooks were written by white people for white people. Every piece of information I consumed until I was 25 years old was curated for me by people that had nothing to do with me. That is not the truth today, at least in my opinion.
I completely agree with that. There's more avenues for challenging beliefs, I think, now. And that I totally agree with. And if you can catch kids when they are in their most curious stage, when when their brains are still thinking about how to form their opinions and stuff, I think that that's right. You can really help influence them to think more broadly about the world.
I think we've landed on one of the critical issues, and I'm really glad there's people like you working in these kinds of companies to highlight these kinds of issues, because this is the kind of issue that the companies that are responsible for social media are highlighting, right? And are talking through. They're very not simple. And there's technology challenges, there's ad model and business challenges that weave into all of this. So we have to wrap up pretty soon, but I just wanted to highlight the importance of those points that we're just discussing at the end here. That's why there's hope, to figure this stuff out, because people are thinking about the complexity of these things, and they're important to shine the light on them, I think.
Yeah, and Andy, I'll say one thing, like the thing I pull out of this, which I think is really true for companies need to be thinking about, is what we're talking about right now. What we were talking about, I mean, is getting more voices into people's brains, like getting more voices in the room, essentially, right, to challenge your ideas. And I think the one thing I think is really important, I think every company needs to be doing this, and I will fight for this until the day I die, is we need more voices, more diverse voices in the rooms of power, even within the companies like we work for, in every.
And that I agree 100%, and that includes conservative voices. Like, I just want to make sure, like, it's clear, like, there's nothing wrong with having a conservative worldview at all. And I think where you live and who your parents are and all that stuff will influence that, and that's okay. And we need to hear from them too. What we need to de-amplify are the fringes and extremes on all sides. There's no two sides, on all sides, and just allow for fair, thoughtful dialogue by people who care. And it doesn't matter then what your point of view is. If you've checked those 3 or 4 boxes, that the dialogue is important. And I agree with you, Anjali, like we need to make sure that when big strategic decisions are being made about anything, whether that's corporate, government, healthcare, or whatever, that unlike in the past, you have a diverse group of expert voices speaking from the positions or angles that they come from, so that it'll be harder to come to consensus, but whatever we decide on, hopefully will be the best overall for most people.
We're nowhere near the panacea on that, but I do think
No.
evidence that that's getting better, and there's going to be a cabinet, and that cabinet's going to be more diverse than the last cabinet, and so we're going to try to keep going here, and so really
and shout out to Chuck D and Flavor Flav for having this discussion when it put their lives at risk. True story. Like, it was dangerous to do what these guys did.
Yeah.
They did it anyway. I can see a Puerto Rican flag on your wallpaper back there. I think I see Thurgood Marshall. It's hard for me to make it out. I think I see Frederick Douglass back there. Shout out to like Pan-Africanism of the 90s, which shaped a lot of people's identities that were growing up in the 90s, like
Still
me.
Still shaping.
And it's still shaping the world. It's still,
Yeah.
Chuck D has, in rap culture, we say you got a lot of sons, meaning a lot of people follow in your footsteps. Chuck D has a lot of sons and daughters that have followed in his footsteps. And, shout out to everything Public Enemy did, and still does, because it's unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anjali, thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys.
Go enjoy the rest of your day off. Go have fun.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.